Hi, my name is Abby Dumes. My pronouns are she, her. I am a white woman with a red floral top. I have circular gold and silver earrings, and I have brown hair and a braid over my left shoulder. In the background, there is a red frame painting, and to my right are bookshelves. Chimére L. Smith, thank you so much for being here and being willing to share your story with the Global Feminisms Project. I'm going to briefly introduce you and then we'll move on to our questions and also let you introduce yourself.
All right, thank you so much.
Chimére L. Smith is a Baltimore-based long COVID advocate, consultant, and educator. She is a former middle school teacher and in 2019 was selected as a Stanford University Hollyhock Teaching Fellow. Since June 2020, she has raised awareness about the importance of Black voices in conversations about and organizations related to long COVID prevention, treatment, and research. Chimére was a board member of Body Politic, a quote, global network of COVID-19 patients, chronic illness allies, and health and disability advocates, and has recently been appointed as a volunteer consultant for ME Action, where she is seeking to engage a more racially diverse volunteer network. Chimére, I'll just let you, yeah, of course.
Thank you so much, Abby, for having me. I appreciate that. I am Chimére Smith. I am a Black woman with a Black tank top on. My haircut is very, very low and short. My earrings are gold with navy blue and white stripes. The couch behind me, which I call Shimmy's couch, is a dark teal color, and the pillow to my right, to my right is purple, light blue, teal, white, and cream.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we're just going to jump into it. We're going to start with you thinking about where you are today and thinking about where your story begins and helping us connect the dots between where your story begins and the journey that brought you to this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Today, as I talk to you, it has been I feel a little bit vindicated. You know, I'm glad that we're talking today because as of today, I am now fully being recognized as a long COVID patient by my doctors, by other medical care professionals, and I am excited to say that. But even as I think about that, I get emotional because that happened yesterday where I was formally recognized, but it has taken 2 years. You know, it's been 2 years since I became sick with long COVID. Wow. And my story started in March of 2020. I was at that time, before I got sick, I was a what I would call a bad teacher. And when I say bad, I don't mean bad in the sense of horrible. I mean, I was like Michael Jackson bad. I was on point. I was very invested and engaged in my students. I taught for Baltimore City Public Schools for 5 years. I taught at a mostly urban, in an urban area with Black and Latino students. And I was proud to be a teacher. And, what was so ironic is that the week before we were scheduled to come out of the classroom because of the pandemic, we were sitting in a circle having a listening session, teacher and students, and the students were expressing their concerns about COVID because they had been reading the news, seeing the news, hearing their families who were working in medical environments, and they were scared, they were concerned. And as a teacher, it was my job to, assure them that they were going to be okay. But none of us truly knew about the impact that COVID would have. And I certainly didn't know what I was going to be in store for less than 2 weeks later. And so, we were told by the governor of Maryland to stay home and to protect ourselves. And I did that. At the time, I was living with a romantic partner. And we had gone and, bought as much supplies as we could, water and hand sanitizer, napkins, tissues, everything that we thought that we would need, including food. And about a week later, while I was talking to my therapist, I started to feel a tickle in my throat. And I noticed it, and I was just like, okay, maybe it might be allergies. This is around the time, March, where I would get seasonal allergies and I would suffer a bit. So I tried to kind of beg that off and say, okay, I'll take care of it. I'll take an allergy pill later, after my appointment with my therapist. And what started off as a scratchy throat turned into what I consider to be the most monstrous fatigue I've ever felt. I've never been so tired. It felt like it was like 10 weighted blankets on me. My head started to feel unclear. I started to feel very unclear, like the way that you feel when you have a horrible cold or the flu. When I would stand up, I would feel extremely tired. My heart would race so fast. I could not, I almost had to hurry up and sit back down. I remember the day I was trying to do a dance because I was trying to make myself feel better. And I couldn't do the dance, for more than 2 minutes because I was so sick and I felt so heavy. At that time, I had diarrhea. And I thought it was because, just thinking like, oh, I just have a little cold or something, and I started to get migraines and headaches. But there was one day that I woke up, the next day, I woke up and I was trying to stretch my body. And in the midst of stretching my body, my back, I had the worst burning, searing pain in my spine. And I thought to myself, I said, something is not right with me. I don't feel well. There's something going on. And so I decided I called a couple of friends, my best friend being one of those people. And I was like, girl, do you think I have COVID? And she said, she said, well, I hope not. She said, but it just sounds like you just might have a little cold. She said, but, if you need to, try to get a test and, take care of yourself. And I said, okay, because everybody I knew was on lockdown. So we weren't seeing each other except for FaceTime or Facebook Messenger. And so I decided that Tuesday night, after not feeling well for the past 3 days, that I would get into my car Wednesday morning and I would go home. Home, for me at that time was I was living with my godmother. And I left my partner's house and I said, because if I was sick, I didn't want to get him sick. And there was some discord between us because I started to feel like I had COVID. I just had no real knowledge at that point. I was just like, something about how I feel doesn't feel like anything I've ever experienced or felt in my life. And so the next day I left his house. But I had went to the doctor. The first doctor was my primary care physician at that time, who said, oh, you're fine. You just have a sinus infection. Take this Flonase, take these antibiotics, and you'll be fine. And I went to another physician and was told the same thing. But I also was told that if you do have COVID, there's no way we can test you because you look fine. You're not short of breath. You're not coughing. You don't have a fever. So go home and rest and you'll be fine. When I went home Wednesday, I decided that night to go to the hospital because I felt horrible. I wasn't getting any better. Nothing was helping. And I went to the hospital around the corner from my house. And it was zombie land in the hospital because only people who were really sick were allowed to be there. And once again, I was told that I could not be tested. And I was giving them, by that time, I had a list of symptoms. And I was providing lists of symptoms. And I was told, go home. You'll be fine. If you have COVID, you'll be fine in 2 weeks. And that happened to me going to the hospital subsequently like that I went to the hospital a total of like 12 times. I went between 2 hospitals. And each and every time I was told the same thing. I was being thrown medication, but nobody would test me the first few times I went. I did not get a COVID test until 2 weeks after my illness, the onset of my illness. And what I started to notice when I went to a local hospital in Baltimore, one of the best and the brightest in the country, is that I would be sent to rooms to sit for hours and hours and hours and hours. And I would hear people talk about men, and they would say, oh, Mr. Such and such has a suspected case of COVID. So we're going to treat him with this. And I would look over across, because I was, in rooms where I could see a little bit across from me, and I would see these were white men, these were Asian men, these were men. And I kept wondering, I was like, why are they getting treated before me? Why are they saying that they have a suspected case of COVID? Here I am coming with a myriad of symptoms, and nobody's addressing why, as a 37-year-old healthy woman, I have, at that time I became constipated. I wasn't pooping. Frequent urination, heart palpitations, loss of smell, loss of taste, dizzy, confused. As time went on, in the end of April, I lost my vision in my left eye. Nobody seemed to care about me, and what was happening to me. Menstrual periods were so heavy and so irregular, which, I know my body. So I was just like, something is wrong here. And so I was going to the hospitals. There was nothing happening. They were dismissing me. I was driving myself, even though I couldn't really see, trying to get answers, begging hospital staff to let me stay, for them to examine me. Nobody would help at all. Just would send me home. It would be the middle of the night, and they'd say, oh, there's nothing wrong. Then they started to suggest that there was something psychologically wrong with me.
Was that explicit? Were the suggestions?
Yeah, absolutely. I was invited to stay in a behavioral section of a hospital. Like, oh, you've been here all these many times and nothing is wrong with you. Maybe it's something that's, maybe you need some mental health help. And I was like, no, I'm getting mental health help. I go to a therapist every week. I want you to tell me what's wrong with me. I was healthy before this. What's wrong? So the more I started to see that and feel that, and I started to feel in such despair. And I thought truly that I was going to die, Abby. By the time we got to May, I was planning my funeral. I had sent a will to my best friend. I had told her, here is what we're going to do. If I don't make it out of this hospital tonight, or if I don't make it home, or you call, she has all the important phone numbers, every number that's important to me. She knows how much, bills I have, responsibilities, who to give what to, because I assured her in May that this is what needed to happen. And by the time June happened, or June came of 2020, I had gotten tired of I had gotten sent home that one last time before I started to take action. And I said, I am sick of this shit. Okay, excuse me. And and I said, I am tired of this. And I called my best friend, who has been the most incredible woman, Sequoia Thompson, to me. And I said to her, if I'm going to die from COVID, because I knew I had it, I said, if I'm going to die from COVID, I am going to go out with guns blazing. And what that meant for me was I was going to talk to anybody who would listen about my circumstances. I was tired. Not only was I fueled by just being a Black woman that was tired, I was also fueled because I joined the group body politic. And I was reading stories from people all across the globe who were dealing with the same treatment. And I was fueled by the fact that all of us were being mistreated. But then I started to think, I said, the group is mostly, comprised of white people. And I said, while I feel for them, I feel for all of us. I especially feel for me because I'm a Black woman living in an urban community, what I call the hood. And I teach in the hood. I grew up in the hood. And if I'm going to these hospitals and experiencing this way, my babies, who by that time in June, I had not, my students, I don't have any children, but my students who I had not seen by that time in 3 months, if they were experiencing this, they would go to the hospitals and they wouldn't necessarily know how to communicate or articulate these experiences, and they would be treated the same way. And so as I thought about us, because initially it was selfish. Advocacy usually starts off with from selfishness, because we're trying to find a way to disrupt systems for ourselves first, or for somebody that we love or care about. And then we start to think about how what's happening to us impacts other people. And so I thought about my students, those students who live in nuclear family homes, students who didn't have enough health insurance to get vaccinated, students who didn't even usually on most days have money to buy to get lunch or to get additional snacks. I thought about if they had to make it to the hospital, what would happen to them? And so in a dark room where I spent about a year of my life, it ended up being a year in a dark room. I picked up my phone. I picked it up and I said, with this one good eye, I am going to email every Baltimore City Council person, every Maryland State delegate that I can find. And I did that. And it took about not even a day where my city council member, Christopher Burnett, who I will never, ever forget, he reached out to me and said, I am going to do some investigating with Johns Hopkins and St. Agnes Hospital in Baltimore, and we are going to get to the root of this problem. And so—
Was that the first response?
Yeah, it was the first response. Then I heard from, Nick Mosby, who was at that time a state delegate, Mary Pat Clark, who was at that time, she's retired, a city councilwoman. People were speaking to me and they were expressing their sorrow, their frustration with me about my circumstance, because my email was so detailed that they couldn't miss it. And so that's how I got the ball rolling on finally being able to have a conversation with Johns Hopkins Wilmer Eye Care Clinic to start the process of having eye surgery. Because what I learned was that due to the inflammation, I had to have I had a dense cataract that developed in my eye. Because COVID has a way of anything that's wrong already, or that's happening in your body already. Some people with COVID or long COVID will tell you that it just speeds it up. So there was a sign months and months and months ago, before that, of me having a small cataract, because I don't have great vision in this left eye. But the doctor said, "Oh, you just need surgery when you're 50." But because of COVID, I needed surgery at 38 years old, which is usually unheard of.
Wow.
For cataract surgery. And so that, Abby, started the ball in my activism and my advocacy for Black women and families with long COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what led me here today, which is why celebrating a full-on long COVID diagnosis may not mean a lot to most people, but it means everything to me, because I fought extremely hard.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Congratulations.
To get it. Thank you.
That is
I
something.
fought so hard.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about how that happened yesterday? Was that,
yeah, absolutely.
Did you find, was that a clinic? Was that
I'm happy to tell you.
New care? Yeah.
Yeah. I have been seeing I've had in the last 2 years, Abby, I've had 3 primary care physicians, because I've had to hire and fire, because what I learned was that my care is so important that I have the right and I have a say in who has care over me. And the other 2 doctors I had were not willing to acknowledge that I had COVID possibly, or that that I had this, post-COVID infection, or, this illness. And so I just decided to find me another doctor. And so I did research, which is something prior to getting sick, I would have never done. I would have just been like, oh, I don't care. Assign me to whoever is close. I'm fine.
Right.
But I found this doctor, and what I liked about her initially is that she acknowledged my symptoms. She acknowledged the fact that I had all of these symptoms that came from somewhere, but she never wanted to acknowledge that it came from COVID. And so I noticed that, I've been her patient for a year. And so I said to myself, okay, there are lots of opportunities for healthcare treatment and management that are cropping up, because long COVID is on everybody's lips now, right? Even the president and congressmen and women. And so I said, if it so happens that I can be a part of a treatment or response to long COVID, I want to be formally diagnosed with it, because we all know that in March of 2020, I was a first waiver. I wasn't allowed to get tested, but the timing and how sick I got made perfect sense. And so I reached out. She and I had a discussion. She said she didn't feel comfortable diagnosing me with long COVID. And so I said to myself, you know what? Let me find the patient relations communication network of Johns Hopkins community physicians. And I want to reach out to them so that someone else can review my case and my medical records. And that happened almost like 2.5 months ago. Okay. It's been almost 3 months. So thank goodness the woman was updating me. The woman I was talking to, she was updating me, and she got the director of the physicians involved. And they started to do some investigating of my symptoms, the timing of my hospitalizations, the medicines I was on, how long I've been out of work. For 2 years, I haven't worked as a teacher. And yesterday, she finally sent me an email, and she said, we are happy to let you know that as of yesterday, we are formally using an ICD code to diagnose you with long COVID. And she said, based upon our conversations with the Johns Hopkins Infectious Disease Network, and Johns Hopkins has a long COVID clinic, and understanding that there are a lot of patients who have had COVID who weren't tested in time, so they never tested positive. Right. But because of the timing, because of the symptoms, we had COVID. So I was able to get that post-COVID diagnosis, as well as a suspected COVID case. So I felt so vindicated yesterday, and I was overwhelmed. And then finally, as I tweeted it out, and I said, because I wanted other people to know that it's possible, right? And so after that, I said, I'm too overwhelmed to cry. But as I was tweeting and people were responding, and I thought about all I had gone through, and I texted my auntie, my favorite auntie, my mama, my best friend, and I said, this is a victory for me. and my aunt, she responded and she said, it is. She said, because you fought for this.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I did
Hard.
fight for it. I
Yeah.
fought for it.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And this is what my advocacy is about. But it's not
Mm-hmm.
just for me. It's for other Black women who
Mm-hmm.
experience this,
Mm-hmm.
because I used to be on the outside of the landscape. My best friend has a neurological condition, and she wasn't acknowledged for years. And I would listen to her stories, and I would say, I would be on the outside. I say, "Oh, girl, that's so sad."
Mm-hmm.
I know women with endometriosis who didn't get correct diagnosis until 5 and 7 years after their initial illness. And I understand now what they're experiencing, because I had to do the same thing. I had to provide evidence. I had to write emails. I had to write letters. I did not give up on what I knew to be true. And this is the reward for that. But it's so sad, Abby, that we live in a country, as everything is happening now, right? Where women still have to prove, like lawyers. I might as well have gotten my law degree. You know, damn teaching. I might as well say I'm a lawyer, because I had to prove in writing, with a sore head, with a limited vision, with achy hands, an aching body, with a body that was crumpled up like paper on some days, in the dark, that I was as sick as I was.
Wow. What do you hope will come with this day-old now diagnosis? Do you have hopes for what it might make possible?
Absolutely. As I mentioned, you know, and it remains to be seen on a political policy level, but you know, we do know that there's a long COVID movement happening, right? That was galvanized by a bunch of women who were sick with long COVID. You know, shout out to the men, but oh my goodness, the voices on Twitter and social media and long COVID groups were resoundingly women, right? Who were telling their stories. And so I do know, as a Black woman, how hard it is to tell our stories, because there's so much fear around being rejected or not heard. And so I'm hoping that that my victory will lead to other Black women seeking the same kind of care, you know, not backing down just because a doctor says, oh, it's this and it's not that. Because if I had let who I really care for, I love her, she's a great doctor, but she just, long COVID is so new, and it's so nuanced that there's so much more to learn. And so if I had been settled with what she was saying, if I were to say, hey, I want to be a part of NIH's trial and clinical trials for antivirals or whatever treatment, I couldn't be, because they would need specific paperwork to say that I'm a long COVID patient. Right. Any way I'm treated going forward, doctors have to acknowledge that first. And so that could be the difference. Like I said in my Facebook post yesterday, that could be the difference between some care and better care. Nice. And over the last 2 years, I've learned that I am deserving and have the right to better care.
Yeah, that's a nice distinction there.
Yeah, and really so that's powerful. What I want for myself. That's what I want, and not only for myself, I want that for all of us.
Right, because it sets a precedent.
It does. Right. It does. Yeah.
And that does seem to be such a hurdle for so many patients, is not having
2 years later
documentation of a positive test.
Right. And that's why I always tell people now, especially, you know, I'm a part of some wonderful, beautiful Black long COVID networks now. And I tell those women in those groups, I say, keep everything and keep every medical document, to be more specific. And make sure that those doctors, even if they do not necessarily believe that they believe that you have long COVID, please please ask them to put it in your medical records that you suspect that you've had COVID and now long COVID. Because somebody needs to see it, and one day somebody's going to see it and they're going to believe it, and then that could be the key and the ticket to better healthcare.
Can you tell us a little bit about these long COVID networks that you're part of? And
Absolutely, yeah.
the work that's being done?
Yeah, absolutely. I am a part of Dr. Margot Gage's BIPOC long hauler, long COVID women's group, which is one of the first pioneering BIPOC long COVID groups for women that really focuses on women of that are not, non-white. There's a safe space for us there. What I love about her group is that she herself has experienced COVID and some of the effects of long COVID. She's an epidemiologist in Texas at Lamar University. So she brings a wealth of statistical data that she's always sharing with us. She's very protective of our group. She's like the mama bear because she doesn't allow her group to get used by organizations who just want to tokenize a BIPOC group. There are connections being made there every day. There's great advice there. Great friendships have been formed from that group. Great ideas. Brilliant women are in that group. And women who are becoming sick with COVID and long COVID, that's a group for women to come to get loved and cared for, and to even get advice. Because still, 2 years later, doctors can't tell us how to take care of ourselves the way we can tell each other how to take care of each other. And so there's a sense of family and community in that group. And of all the groups I've been a part of some amazing groups, but I was looking for a group that represented me, that when I was a part of the group, I saw myself. And so that is the group that I chose to, I choose to be the most active in right now. And I can't wait to see more exciting things that we do together in the next year or so.
That sounds really powerful. What platform does the group use? Is it all virtual?
It's Facebook. It's a Facebook group. Yeah.
Amazing. And then we mentioned that you're also a new volunteer with Emmy Action. Do you want to describe that work a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. What's so interesting is that when I first got sick, I was introduced to another pioneer in the chronic illness world. Her name is Wilhelmina Jenkins. She's a Black woman who lives in Atlanta, Georgia. Wonderful woman who has ME, right? And she, which is another chronic illness, which I love my connection I gained from her, because she was one of the first people in Emmy Action who acknowledged the fact that that a lot of us were suffering from some of the same symptoms as chronic fatigue syndrome or other exhaustion inducing chronic illnesses. And so I thought that was interesting that a group would come out and show so much support for long COVID patients, because they were seeing that in a post-viral world in our conditions, that we were suffering from some of the same symptoms. And so I met her. I met a woman in California named Ashanti Daniel, and those women were a part of Emmy Action. And so they were two of the first Black women to actually talk to me and talk to a couple of other of us to say, hey, you might need to consider either reducing your hours at your job or leaving your job. And I was devastated to hear that at first, because I was like, what you mean quit I love teaching. I'm never leave. You know what I mean? Even in August of 2020, when school was about to start again virtually, I was like, I'm going back to work. I'm going to feel better. But I felt horrible in August. But these women actually came and talked to me and a few others and said, hey, we've seen this before. Here's how we can support you. And they kept stressing this whole stop, rest, and pace formula to that would help to alleviate some of the exhaustion, right? And I was like, I don't want to do that. But I found that the more I rested after activities or before activities, I started to feel a little bit like myself again. And so it wasn't so much that I was looking for to be a part of ME Action. I think that the stars aligned that I met great members of ME Action first. And so then by the time this year happened and they approached me about this wonderful opportunity to help engage a more racially diverse volunteer, I had to say, yeah, because that group was one of the first groups that embraced the long COVID community. And the truth of the matter is a lot of these health organizations need to have a more diverse population of people. Board memberships, active members and volunteers, staff members, paid staff members, internships. There needs to be a plethora of a BIPOC of representation in these organizations. And there are many reasons why they're not. But I would like to at least start the conversation, because I spent a lot of time over the last 2 years being angry, right? About being the only Black woman or the discarded Black woman. And I had sung that song and I still feel that way. But over the last 6 months, I started to think about my mission, my purpose. And I have a niece who will be a year old this Sunday.
Oh my gosh.
Monica. And I said to myself, one day, Monica's going to find this information about her auntie and the legacy, because she's the only I don't have children. I don't plan on having children of my own. She's the only girl in the family that's going to be building our legacy, right? And I said one day she's going to look at stuff about auntie and she's going to wonder, did auntie stay the angry Black woman? Or did auntie cultivate a mission and a purpose where she could still be angry, but that she could do something instrumental and constructive with her anger? And so instead of continuously saying all these white groups, they just, I don't see any Black people. I said, you know what? Like my friend Liza Fisher, who also has long COVID, said, I want to be the disruptor in the community that doesn't have representation that looks like me. And so I decided to disrupt in a different way.
Wow, that's really inspiring.
Thank you.
Have you figured out how to sort of build on, you've mentioned being tired in a range of ways, but the physical exhaustion of continuing to feel unwell and the energy that it takes to blaze a path in that way. Do you have strategies for, is it still sort of resting and pacing? Is that how you sort of move forward?
Absolutely.
With the work that you're doing?
Absolutely. It takes, I definitely strategize my schedule, and I am so, the good thing about my being a teacher is that I already came a little bit equipped with this, right? Because as a teacher, I was very much a stickler of time. How long classes went, when they began, when they ended, lunchtime, recess, all of those things. And so I have become even more of a stickler about me and understanding that in order for me to be present. I have to rest. There are days, Abby, where there are days at a time when I have to, this couch is Shimmy's couch. This couch will transfer into my bed because I understand that in order to move a little bit, talk a lot, whatever it is I have to do on any given day, when I can do it, right? It's contingent upon when I can do it. And if I can do it, I have to rest. Resting has become, let me say it like this, has become my primary job. And it's interesting as a woman, because most of us, and especially as I look at how our country operates, I was talking to somebody the other day who said, oh my goodness, I miss working 100 hours per week. And I thought about my life as a teacher, and I would come in to the school building at 6:30 a.m. I wouldn't leave until 6:30 p.m. I would stay as long as I could. I would be there on weekends. I would be planning lessons on Saturdays and Sundays when I should have been out enjoying myself. I wasn't resting like I should have. I wasn't we don't practice that anyway. And so what I've had to learn how to do is to make resting my number one priority, even to the dismay of family, friends, loved ones, and people who just have that idea of going. Right. I can't afford to do that, because if I go, I will be sick for days or weeks or months at a time. Right. And I don't want that. I have post-traumatic stress disorder now. So the whole idea of me putting myself at risk because I've overextended myself for someone else, and I don't understand the word no, that scares me. So oftentimes I'm scared into resting, because I'm like, look, can't anything stop me from resting, because I'd rather lay on this couch for 2 days than speak at this event or that event, or go do this and do this. And then for 2 weeks, I'm down for the count. Right. Which is what a lot of us are still suffering with 2 years later. Exactly. So would you say that your primary persistent symptom at this point is fatigue? Is that? No, it's not. No, actually I have a lot of things going on with me. The list continues. And that's the interesting part about invisible illnesses, is that if people don't see it, they don't believe it. That's right. But I have chronic migraines now. Okay. I get about 10 to 20 migraines a month. Oh, I'm sorry. I have something called occipital neuralgia, which affects the back of my brain stem. It can sometimes cause burning of my scalp around my temple area, my shoulders, my neck. Sometimes it affects my ability to swallow and speak. And it causes a lot of sinus pressure. So those are two of my biggest symptoms that causes blurry vision, confusion, memory loss. And that also feeds into the exhaustion. Sure. Migraine sufferers are usually exhausted. And so that I also have developed, I'm in the process of looking for a rheumatologist now, because I'm only 40. And I have developed, because of the inflammation in our bodies, I have developed, it feels like arthritis in my hands, my fingers, and my ankles and my feet, my toes. I have deep muscle pain at times, to the point where sometimes moving is difficult. Are there any particular muscles where that tends to? Arms, and my arms, my shoulders. It feels like, and I used to go to the gym all the time to get summer ready. And even exercising is difficult for me now, right? And so, that soreness of working out, I get that soreness once or twice a month, and I haven't been to a gym in like 3 years. It's just, our bodies are so inflamed. When I do any blood work, they always say, that inflammation is still pretty high. And it's everywhere. I also now get these chickenpox-like rashes on my body. I don't know if you can see, there's one.
Oh,
And there are many all around. I mean, I've always cared. I used to have eczema. That was my biggest thing. But now those are everywhere on my body, ankles, on my booty, on my legs, on my thighs. And I said, Lord, I mean, it's ridiculous.
wow. So the list that you had in 2020 has changed. I mean, the list is so long, but the symptoms have sort of changed over time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that that people need to remember is that, and there's caution when I say one thing may become resolved, right? But there is going to be something else that crops up. So you may not have the body pain, but I just read a study this morning that talked about, or not a study, I'm sorry. I just saw a tweet from a doctor who treats dementia patients and Alzheimer's patients, who said that they've never seen like this before, a memory loss issue like we've seen with long COVID. And they treat people who have memory loss. But they are also doing studies and tests, and they're seeing such a large number of people with long COVID or post-COVID who have memory issues. So you almost trade one for the other, and it's sad.
I've been struck by how much you've described the support that you've had from other women. And I guess the segue for me, question-wise, would be to think a little bit about feminism, how you understand the term, what it means in your current work now, whether you consider yourself to be a feminist. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts.
I think about that often. I was blessed to be able to study feminism, Black feminism, at Morgan State University. Go Bears in Baltimore, Maryland, under a woman named Dr. Sheffy and so many other beloved professors. And so I have my own version and view of what I believe feminism is. And I think it is an outrageous, sensational, yet overtly intelligent fight for all women. Right? I never saw myself as a feminist. I would read books about Maya Angelou and Terry McMillan. I'm sorry, not Terry, Toni Morrison, and read books where we explore the ideas of feminism, the suffrage movement, burning bras, and protesting down streets. And I never saw myself as a feminist. I don't know if I think I'm deserving of the label. But what I will say is this. In order to, people tell me this often, and I've always had issues with receiving love and receiving flowers, people giving me things. And this has been especially difficult for me for the last 2 years, because there have been such a large number of women and people who are DMing me and sending me emails and sending gifts and support, who are like, oh my God, you helped save my life. And if it had not been for you, and I'm encouraged by you. And I'm just like, me, little old me, like who never used to want to, I would never like to start confrontation. I always wanted to be seen as the good Black girl. But when I think about what I've had to do to bring awareness as one of the very first Black women to talk about the long COVID experience, what I've had to do to speak about the health rights of Black women with long COVID, it was outrageous. Because I was doing something that historically I would never have done. I was also doing what a lot of Black women are forced not to do. It was sensational because I used my experience with a condition that was unheard of practically at that time to get my point across. It was bold, it was brazen. And that's what feminism is to me. All of those things, even in the ugliness of it, whether it's real or perceived, to open up a door for some part of women's rights. And I think in order to be a feminist, you have to be willing to be outrageous, sensational, intelligent, brazen, bold, because there's always going to be an avenue, a layer, a lane in which we have to fight for the rights of women. The door is never closed. We see it today. In historical times that we live in. And so I see myself I hate to say it, gosh. And I think it's a part of being a woman is that we've been taught to, especially a Black woman, I've been taught that in order to be successful in this country, that the more demure, quiet, covertly successful or to hide, what I know, who I am, what I can bring to the table. I've been taught that to be successful, to do that as a Black woman. And yet everything I had to do over the last 2 years to get here, I had to break every single one of those rules. So I would call myself a feminist. I would. Because my mission has never changed. It's always been about the education, the visibility, the representation of long COVID experiences coming from Black women. I care about all women. I care about all people. But I live in this body and I know what it's like to be me. And when I talk to other Black women, our stories it's almost like we wrote a script. Because in this space, a lot of our stories are the same.
It's so powerful.
Thank you.
And really connects with how we were going to wrap up the interview, thinking about gender health and long COVID, and particularly in the context of long COVID, what your experiences and work has sort of revealed about the intersectional dimensions, whether that's gender, race, class, ethnicity, and what long COVID can tell us a little bit more about gender health and medicine in the US.
Absolutely. What's so funny is that like I said, I realized in June 2020 that if I was going to do this, it was either going to be go big or go home. And so my goal big was to speak to the media, to speak to everybody, to speak to as many people who would listen. And I have to shout out Fiona Lowenstein, who's now about to publish the first long COVID survival guide, really proud, which I wrote a chapter in, who, as a white woman, she used her platform and her visibility, and she passed the torch to me. Because in like the end of May, early June, she was she was saying, hey, I want you to interview with such and such. I don't think they need to see another white woman. She said, you've been speaking about this. I want you to go on such and such. And that afforded me the opportunity to go on MSNBC, on to the Today Show. I mean, all these different platforms and stuff, which I'm grateful for. But one of the most important conversations I had about the intersectionality of gender, health, race, and class was when I told Representative Anna Eshoo in California that I was a poor, Black, disabled woman in Baltimore. I wanted to cover as much of that intersectionality as I could. Because most times people don't tell it as real as that. They wanted to hear about, tell us about your symptoms and what you go through on a daily basis. And I was like, fuck that. I'm not, I've told that story too many times.
Right.
What I want you to see is that I was a teacher making almost $70,000 a year. And in less than a year, I'm not even making a quarter of that. I wanted them to know that I played all of my cards right in being a successful Black woman, right? They tell us to mind our manners, go to school, get a degree, get the house, move out the hood, get married, have children, be quiet, don't say much, don't challenge your bosses, don't challenge the system. I did all of that, except for the house and the marriage and the kids. Although I did gain about 100 because I taught school. And the stuff that I was supposed to get for playing the good Black little girl, I did not get. I did not get acknowledged with my blue and white insurance card. I'm looked at today with all the education, with all of the achievement as a teacher. When my school system sent me my letter telling me that my contract wasn't renewed, they didn't say it was because they understood because I had long COVID. They said it's because I haven't been present in my job because I've been sick. People don't think about the cross lanes and sections of being all of these things combined into one. And so every time I speak, I want people to know what this looks like. I don't want people to ever look at me and not hear me say that today I live on a Social Security check of $1,600 a month, when rent for most of us in this country is $2,000 a month. I never want people to not hear me say that long COVID has disabled me. I never want people to not hear me say that the ecosystem that I created to supply and provide for my mother, who will be 65 this year, was completely eradicated when I got sick. My goal was to make enough money to teach for another 5 years, to become a principal or a school leader, and send my mama money every month to assure that she was taken care of. My mama didn't go to college. She's worked all her life. She has 2 children, and my goal was to work hard enough to help her pay for something, a bill, or for rent, or something, because I had finally made it. And in less than a month, in March of 2020, that ecosystem collapsed.
Oh, it's so devastating.
And so we do need to start thinking about race and gender and class, and how everything becomes disrupted when stuff like this happens. We don't think about it enough. We don't even talk about it. We can't be reactive to this. We have to be proactive. We don't talk about what happens when things like this devastate all of those topics. Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you, as we wrap up and sort of leave on these thoughts, is there a vision of a future at this point?
Yeah, it is. And I'm so glad that there is. And this may not make sense to a lot of people, because I think what happens with it's just like being a woman, right? You know, we have our families, our partners, our jobs, our careers, our missions, our purposes, and we will wear ourselves out trying to make everything happen, doing so much for other people, and not knowing how to say no, and not knowing how to do things for ourselves, and not taking the right amount of time for ourselves. But what this has taught me, and I've learned so much, and this is such a cliche, I've learned so much about myself over the last 2 years. And I've had to be so patient and gracious with myself. I mean, you're looking at a woman who could not walk for 9 months, like without some type of aid, or couldn't stand for a long time. And I had to teach myself really how to walk again, right? Long COVID is a part of my life now, but it is not my life. And so my vision for my future is a vision where there is adequate treatment, a management of symptoms for myself and other Black women, other people, period, but really for Black women, especially those of us who live in urban, low-income neighborhoods like the ones I have been a part of my entire life, where I taught. But my goal is to also enjoy my life. And it is going to sound so bizarre, but I love my life. And so even when it comes to advocacy and activism, I no longer feel guilty when I can't commit to everything. Because I used to never prioritize myself. I used to be a big people pleaser. And yet one of the biggest lessons I've learned the last 2 years, Abby, is that I can advocate, but I have to be the first person I advocate for. And so my future is bright, because you know, I'm on the right antidepressants now, so I don't suffer as much with depression like I used to. You know, I'm working with organizations that are really trying to find ways to help long COVID patients. I feel good about those things. I feel good about my volunteerism, but I am also stopping outside when I can to smell the flowers, to look at the trees, to be thankful for every moment that I'm here, to be thankful for a long COVID diagnosis, the small things, because I never want my voice of advocacy to be louder than the love and the care that I give to myself. Because some people are killing themselves in advocacy too.
Right. No,
They
that's
don't
a really
rest.
beautiful message.
Yeah. And so that's my goal for myself. My goal is to really take the best care of myself, eating better, trying to walk a little bit more, taking my medicine on time, being around, if I can, because I'm deathly afraid of getting COVID again, people that I enjoy, reading and one day falling in love, you know, again, because I'm a helpless romantic. And so those things and writing more, because I have I want to write an article, soon about what it's like, how long COVID helped me to realize I don't want kids. And so there are lots of things left for me to do.
Yeah.
And advocacy is not just power to the people, right? It is writing about that.
Right.
It's showing up for Emmy Action. It's being a better best friend. It's speaking, having a focused mission, which over 2 years I didn't have until now. And so that's what my future looks like. Being there for my niece, telling her
Your
about
one-year-old
this.
niece.
Yeah, my future. On some days it looks grim, but on most days it looks bright.
I'm so glad to hear that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for
Thank you. I hope I didn't talk you half
joining
to death.
us. Oh my gosh. It was such an honor to interview you as an inspirational story. Thank you so much for being willing to share it with the Global Feminisms Project. And
thank you.
I know so many people will benefit from it. So
thank you.